2 years ago, if you were to ask me what my favorite MMO is, I would have confidently said World of Warcraft. A year later, I unsubscribed for what is likely the last time. What followed was a year of video game soul searching, wherein I sought to fill a Warcraft shaped void. I played through Final Fantasy XIV. Again, I, for the first time, invested more than a cursory glance at Guild Wars 2, leveling up multiple characters, exploring the raids and fractals, and even dipping my toe into PvP, only to haphazardly stumble upon Black Desert Online. For the next half year or so, I spent my time addicted to BDO, which opposed many of the prior titles I had bounced between. It is a more sandbox driven game with a long term character progression and an unbelievably complex trade economy that accents the repetitive, flow state driven combat grinds making up its backbone. I appreciated the back-end processes that made the game function, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like I not only inhabited a populated world, but played a part in it. As a new player, I had to invest an inordinate amount of time to learn the complex systems, the language of the game. This language, at once confusing and more than occasionally obtuse, wound up feeling rewarding to parse and eventually speak. Unfortunately, the flaws of the title are almost as great as its successes. Most blatantly, the aggressive monetization yields heavy advantages for those spending real world money in its cash shop. By presenting such a living world and undercutting it with this form of monetization, my interest waned, but my appreciation, my want to find something akin to it without the same flaws, remained. Throughout this multi MMO journey, I discovered certain foundational truths about how I approach the genre and what I enjoy about it. In my prior videos, I said that a great MMO is one that makes their players want to become citizens of the world rather than just tourists. This axiom remains, but the functions of the world that beget such a desire are not only subjective, but also endless. So endless, in fact, that I have spent dozens of hours writing tens of thousands of words just to cover a minuscule, almost imperceptible fraction. An MMO is inherently multimodal and relies on an amalgam of different engagement types to sustain what is the most paramount feature of the genre, its overworld. Being multiplayer isn't a concept that is synonymous with cooperation, it's synonymous with simultaneity. We are all, as members of the game world, experiencing events simultaneously, and that fact forms the ground zero to our connection with the world. The longer we spend in this world, the more we tend to feel connected to it, and as long as we deem what it gives us as valuable enough, we retain that connection by giving it the finite amount of time we, as adults and humans, have. That is the importance of agreed upon value. The failure of many MMOs is their insistence, or better yet, their insecurity, in allowing their players the agency to approach them at their own pace and influence them in ways not meticulously orchestrated by the developers. As a result, we often see modern MMOs employ restricting systems that gate your time spent in the world, limiting what you can do and how by the arbitrary regulations predicated by a game too insecure to allow its players the ability to just play. Dailies, weeklies, monthlies, are yearlies a thing yet? These are all symptoms of the greater struggle for agency, the friction between players often wanting more at the cost of the game's demand. Some may enjoy the pattern of incrementality within modern MMO structures, with these governing systems like dailies acting as punch-ins do at work, after work. Others may find them patronizing. So why govern yourself at all? A sandbox seems to be the answer to the turgid nature of these theme park MMOs. However, sandbox MMOs are, by and large, failures. They tend to offer too much freedom to explore far too little content, and that freedom is often terrifying. It's mystifying. It makes a cryptic puzzle out of a game that pushes those looking to simply unwind away. There was a time between my uninstalling of Black Desert Online and my spurious decision to play Oldschool Runescape when I felt like every MMO, in its own unique way, failed to offer me the kind of gameplay I desired, a depth of systems without bloat, a long-term grind without an overpresent cash shop, a thriving world comprised of more than just a couple dozen boomers reminiscing on the good old days. The answer, as it often is, lays somewhere in between: a new incarnation, an old philosophy, a modern eye on the antiquities of a bygone era, a blend of old school architecture and modern engineering. From my experience, there really is only one MMO that has managed this vague convalescence: RuneScape. Twice failed, a game run into the ground by a vision or lack thereof, a game relaunched feebly by will of player and developer alike as a glimpse into what could be if, for a moment, we could peer into the future and swerve clear of the mistakes in the present. On a Saturday like any other, in a Discord call with a few friends, one of which, like me, is an Azerothian refugee disenfranchised by the state of World of Warcraft, I asked a question: what if we made a group Iron Man? With little knowledge and little to no nostalgia, we embarked on a new journey marked by frustration, confusion, exasperation, joy, childlike awe, and unbelievable value. But first, I think we should understand the importance of separating the myths of art and consumer. When I think to my recent experience with a game I now call my favorite of all time, Elden Ring, I don't just reminisce on the adrenaline-fueled excitement of fighting Melania, or the joy upon defeating her, or even the tension sinking into the earth on the lift down to the Siofra River basin. I am, in equal part, reminiscent of the mundane, the occasionally long horse rides along rocky outcrops or flooded marshes, or even the annoying deaths and their runbacks, the feeling of being lost or trapped, confused, and overwhelmed. These emotions aren't explicitly positive, yet without them, if the game was only a gauntlet of heart-pumping challenges, it would never have become a favorite. In many ways, it would cease to be memorable at all. That's because during times of mundane traversal, we engage in what is likely to be the most impactful psychological element of gaming: the thought put into future action, a residual consideration. Essentially, we're theory crafting, thinking about potential choices, searching for hidden alcoves, uncovering the puzzles of the overworld. We're acting linguists, still parsing the unknown language of the game, and that thought is so much more evocative emotionally than an exciting experience is in a vacuum. In fact, it is a boon to the excitement that is to come. Art is not a flat line of enjoyment. We all begin a game or film or book with the knowledge that this experience will not be a linear, static feeling. Art is strange in that way, as it allows emotions to swell prior to even pressing play and to linger far after the final page is nothing but a formative memory. This is what I call the artistic heartbeat that we all love. It allows us to experience otherwise negative emotions we tend to avoid in a safe environment, emotions such as fear, anger, or hatred. It's psychologically explorative and, in a not so pretentious sense, self-realizing. It tells us more about ourselves than anything else, and we, knowing or not, value that enough to seek it. Oldschool Runescape is that. It is defiantly that. A journey languishing in tedium, frustration, boredom, confusion, joy, excitement, and indescribable fulfillment. It is easily one of my favorite experiences I have ever had in a game, and it now handedly sits alongside my most beloved titles, a list curated by age more than anything. After all, most of our most formative memories in art happen when we are younger, more malleable, less egotistical, more open to being challenged. Naivety is a word artistically synonymous with enthrallment and a lack of cynicism. So being able to have that in my age is a testament to the journey's strength and, to a more analytical eye, the journey's language. So much of this has disappeared within modern gaming, and no genre has been more thoroughly impacted by the technologic growth and spread of information than simultaneous genres like MMOs. By and large, MMOs have tried to adapt to this new form, but as a result have lost much of their most beloved elements. You have these enormous uninstanced open worlds, and you are guided on rails to do a small, select sliver of content that will only be relevant for a short period of time. The cadence of content updates may be great, such as in World of Warcraft, every half a year being marked by a new area, a new raid, a new dungeon, but not only is the interaction with that content identical to all the content preceding it, it is also milled through at a lightning pace, and as its brief brief 6 months in the limelight passes, it ceases to inhabit the public conscious at all. More anecdotally, there's a reason why so many of the most beloved WoW raids are more than a decade old. The modern stuff, good or not, is heaped into the landfill that is irrelevant content within a theme park MMO, only bearing fruit for the cosmetic dumpster divers that saunter through it every week for a chance at collecting a recolored piece of armor to add to their ever-growing collection of cosmetic overrides. When a game can brush aside these anchors and deliver something that harkens back to a more evocative era, I would be foolish not to highlight it. The first steps into Oldschool Runescape laid the groundwork for where I am today. I, emboldened by the flame of addiction, decided to embark on this entirely new experience with as open a mind as I could bear. After all, my experience with Oldschool Runescape is incredibly sparse. I dabbled very casually for a couple months a decade ago. Therefore, as we created a group Iron Man team and entered the world, it at once flooded me with nostalgia and had very discernibly changed. Many of my expectations were subverted in the first 10 or so hours. This journey began like any other, with a distinct fumbling through the game's rather intuitive settings and overwhelming RuneLite plugins, an add-on-like format stemming from a third-party client created by passionate RuneScape fans. This client accrued so much use, so much independent developer-driven support that Jagex, the creators of RuneScape, had no choice but to integrate it with the game proper, and as a result, opened the veritable floodgates of external plugins. Hundreds, if not thousands, of small improvements and moderated alterations to the game, ranging from the ability to mark ground tiles to utterly transforming the graphics. While at the extreme endgame this can sometimes look absurd, muddying the simple beauty of the game's aesthetics with garish, colored squares and buzzing UI prompts, it never reaches the farcical stupidity of World of Warcraft raid and dungeon add-ons that transform the game's approachable UX into a spaceship cockpit for hyper-fixated train enthusiasts. After navigating this list of seemingly mandatory add-ons, our starting experience finally culminated with us spawning, after a brief tutorial, into Lumbridge, a half-city that exists in the public conscious in the same way Stormwind or perhaps Goldshire does, albeit for different reasons. It's a hazy, melancholic area named after the River Lum running below the titular bridge. It bisects two areas, a safe castle and a goblin-infested camp. What you are likely to notice first is what the game looks like and what the game sounds like. Oldschool RuneScape's art is in some ways controversial, as all original art tends to be, but as the years go by, it proves again and again that its timeless aesthetics are only appreciated more with age. To not make this already long script longer, I will make two claims about the graphics of OSRS. One, they are unbelievably challenging to replicate, as any great art style is, and as a result have paved the way to make RuneScape one of, if not the most recognizable MMORPGs on Earth. Two, they are no less objectively good-looking than any other graphically timeless title. The common saying of stylized games outlasting hyper-realistic ones always holds true, but I will point out how disappointing it is that OSRS rarely gets the credit it deserves in this regard. Even within its community, there is a distinct lack of appreciation for the visuals. They are often the butt of a joke, and while that is perfectly fine, I do want to give the artists their deserved flowers as well. Oldschool RuneScape is not ugly. That has never been the appeal of the game, nor will it ever be the appeal of the game. Historically, RuneScape as an IP has gone through many shifts in graphical style, from its early MUD days to its classic era to its RuneScape 2 overhaul in 2004, which started the aesthetics that we now most commonly associate with the title. However, prior to the re-release of Oldschool in 2013, the game continued to evolve in its main incarnation, now called RuneScape 3, an HD update that brought with it vulgar textures and simplistic lighting, all the way to where RuneScape 3 is now, a patchwork of barely connected styles ranging from quite ugly and dated to pretty great. In some ways, Oldschool RuneScape has also evolved since its re-release, as it was specifically a re-release of the 2007 era game, wherein the harsher aesthetics of the 2004 RuneScape 2 launch were beginning to be dissolved. At the time, modern updates like God War's Dungeon really showcased an evolution of the aesthetic pioneered in 2004, with gradual shifts away from the retro textures on walls, the gradient-based shading, to the flat plane, polygonally shaded models we see today. Much like the game as a whole, the art style has become an extension of correcting the wrongs of the past. What started as a passion project for a few developers is now a full-blown artistic statement, with contemporary releases utilizing the found consistency of art style to incredible effect, retaining the simplistic beauty of the past with the modern flair. One of my favorite examples being the Lasar Undercity and the Stranglewood, two areas discovered and explored during the Desert Treasure 2 quest, which, spoilers, is the single best quest in any MMO ever made, and honestly, it's not even close. The art style has evolved from retro appreciation to beauty, all the while remaining more consistent than other 20-something-year-old games. This can only occur as a result of being able to see what would happen if one were to stray too far away from the light. Of course, graphics are only as important as sound. I'll keep this section as short as I can because while graphics are both appreciated and contentious, the sound is not. Oldschool Runescape has the most recognizable and beloved soundtrack of any MMORPG ever released. And for good reason, too. There are people who have never stepped foot in the game world that recognize its main theme. There are people who think Sea Shanty 2 is just too funny. But at its core, this can only happen when the expansive soundtrack manages to not only convey the tone of its associated setting, but also create truly memorable melodies that are synonymous with where they take place. I have never played a game where the overworld is so large and yet just about every area has an immediately recognizable soundtrack. While the heights of titles like World of Warcraft are almost impossible to match in their grandiose, high fantasy renditions, they also rarely manage to reach those heights themselves. To this day, we can point to some of the greatest compositions in fantasy games coming from World of Warcraft's music library, but they are few and far between. Oldschool Runescape, on the other hand, is kind of the opposite. The preponderance of earworms is borderline inexplicable. I cannot, for the life of me, understand how just about every damn song is so memorable. This love of its music extends to its sound effects as well. The MIDI nature of the soundscape has evolved, sure, but in all of the game world, it is connected and imbued by the same sort of simple beauty the graphics are. The soundscape of RuneScape would be its greatest achievement if it weren't for its systems. After the wave of audiovisual noise died down, standing in Lumbridge, the resounding feeling became that of confusion. There are no pop-ups demanding you do something, no arrows segueing you into a quest or an NPC. It just is a world with an innumerable amount of interactions that you must begin to decode. Oftentimes, the best way to do this is through questing. Quests in RuneScape exist in a strange dichotomy of being both underappreciated and used to express the game's uniqueness. They are one of one, bespoke little stories painting the world through puzzles, both overt and figurative. Today, they are usually done with the Quest Helper plugin, a powerful tool that transforms one of the most unique elements of the game into a more standard, arrow-driven questing experience that one may be familiar with from other RPGs. This plugin has solved many of the cryptic elements, and the dialogue is mostly skipped by the players as well. Yet, the quests are still considered to be the best in the genre, and they are, Quest Helper or not. To those unfamiliar, questing in RuneScape is at ends with the traditional MMO, wherein you, as your character, are tasked with culling a group of creatures for some vague, barely exposited reason, and then returning to the taskmaster for a reward of experience and perhaps something else. The other standard archetype is, of course, fetch quests, which demand you travel from one location to another to speak with an NPC for some reason. These two archetypes are broken up on occasion, but the functions of them are no more demanding. Demand is the heart of the issue. A game must demand something of you for you to offer it something back. This is the simple language of player and developer. If you are asked something, you ought respond back in kind. If you are asked for nothing, then you are likely to offer nothing back, and offering nothing will never connect you to whatever it is you are experiencing. If you ever wonder why the story of some MMOs feels utterly irrelevant, it's likely because the manner through which it is told demands you ignore it. RuneScape then is quite unique. Through all of the most powerful questing helpers, it still demands so much from you as a player. It asks you to learn the language of the game, the way items interact, the way creatures attack, the way you respond, and most impressive, does so while occasionally challenging you in a way no other MMO questing system does, by killing you if you do it wrong. Quests in RuneScape are respected because of negative emotions just as much as positive ones, whether those be memories of utter childhood confusion in trying to solve a puzzle or determine a next step, or memories of moments ago where a quest boss hands you your ass on a platter. Two situations that no popular current MMO offers at all. You are respected enough by the language of the game to feel confident in responding back. The limited output of quests in OSRS, unlike its competitors, allows them to craft stories that are unique to the game itself. They aren't repetitive or grindy, they simply are. All it takes to build the most beloved questing architecture of any MMO is 160 or so bespoke, deeply personal, wholly original stories that are operatively no different than the rest of the game. But what do I mean by that? When you are asked to create something in a quest, the item you are creating may be unique, but the method of creation isn't. As a result, the puzzle of solving a quest comes about from your knowledge of the game, knowledge that expands the more quests you've solved. Because the puzzles are oriented around game knowledge, they aren't overt in the way you may expect from a standard RPG. Where do you obtain a certain item? How does one combine it with another? Each quest begets a binary interaction like that, and binary interactions form the story of the world, how you exist in it, and the language of the game as a whole. Broken down to its simplest parts, RuneScape is a string of 1-0 functions that form a grander image. Use a chisel on an uncut gem, receive a cut gem. Use a chisel on a cut gem, receive bolt tips that are attachable to crossbow bolts. Attaching said gem tips operates through that very same binary, and so is enchanting them to create enchanted bolts, which, once more, follows the binary of clicking on an enemy and attacking it. Of course, there are rudimentary level requirements that open all of these interactions up, but increasing your level isn't a new interaction, it's the same one, but repurposed for something better. What is being defined here, as you may have likely heard me mention before, is the language of game design. How teaching one action is parallel to learning a word, and through teaching a string of actions, we can begin to form sentences that can be read by those familiar with the actions being performed. RuneScape has distilled this system by applying this binary across the entire game. Virtually everything has a 1-0 action in a vacuum, and then is followed by a further action to form a string of interconnected events, also called reactions. To not dwell on the value of questing too long, I will say that this simplicity is hard to replicate and is a distillation used by RuneScape to create a subtextual narrative in its quests. Outside of the charming, occasionally funny or great dialogue that relays the textual story of the quest, a boy lost his ball, there was a plague in West Ardoyne, a dwarf wants to win a fishing competition, there is an equally, if not more engaging, subtextual narrative, the story created by the language of your actions, the story you tell through progression. Many quests in other MMOs do rely on core 1-0 interactions, but they often occur in a vacuum. The action as defined is collecting an item in a linear way, or for more story-centric MMOs, clicking through NPC dialogue. Very rarely is there a level of depth or consideration in the secondary narrative experience. But what does that experience even look like? For us, it looked like helping a cook bake a cake. Likely the first quest done by most new players, it is a simple story in both senses, teaching you the basics of what will eventually become the lexicon you aptly wield, the prose you write as a master of game knowledge. But for now, mill some flour by picking wheat in a nearby field, stuff it into a hopper, realize you forgot to activate the milling process, and then use a pot on the flour bin. Pick up an egg from a nearby chicken coop, milk a dairy cow. Once all the ingredients have been collected, return them to the cook and be rewarded with cursory cooking experience. What starts so simply quickly grows in complexity. What you just did will define the rest of the game, and every secondary puzzle can be solved through that same kind of interaction, with a varying degree of complexity and insinuated meaning. Sometimes you may struggle to locate an item, other times understand an interaction, but the process of receiving a command and using the language of the game to write a sentence or even more is what creates the heart of RuneScape's gameplay. Completing the Cook's Assistant quest is akin to learning your ABCs. Eventually, that may involve struggling with the Cat in the Hat, and it will all culminate with the Silmarillion. While I won't go into my favorite quest, not in this video at least, I will shout out the pacing of the entire questing experience. Earning the quest cape was amongst my proudest achievements, not just due to the time investment, but due to how many levels of my own ego I had to strip away to brave the treacherous depths of this medieval point-and-click adventure game. What quests offer on top of just the explicit pleasure of completion is something even more exciting: rewards. Progressing in Oldschool Runescape is known as two related things: slow and tedious. I often see these two words, or one of their many synonyms, being used when describing how the game is most often played and what one has to do to achieve anything. Even completing quests demands you reach a certain level requirement prior to beginning them. Not an overall level, but levels of different skills that would be utilized in the quest. Or you can chop a tree for 200 hours and get a cape. What people neglect to mention here is somewhat easy to overlook: the best progression system of any MMO ever. And it's not even close. Again, not to walk that back immediately, but I of course can only speak on the experiences I have had in just about all of the most popular MMOs, from New World to Lost Ark to 60-odd thousand hours in World of Warcraft and more. To say that Oldschool Runescape has cracked the ever-confounding mysteries of character progression is as much an understatement as it is a pithy and stupid observation. The groundbreaking, earth-shattering, mind-melting realization had by RuneScape is threefold. I call them the 3 commandments for addiction. 1. Rewards ought be proportional to the time investment they demand. 2. Time investment is at the center of most of the rewards in the game. And 3. Rewards should almost never exist in a vacuum. Let's elaborate. Not too long ago, I released a video discussing why so many of the best MMOs are incredibly old, and in that video I came to the conclusion that MMOs, more so than any other game genre, require time to achieve their imperative goals, which is establishing a collective connection to the world and its citizens, the players. You. To gain anything out of an MMO outside of cursory flitting excitement, you must become a citizen of its world, not just a tourist. You know, that's my catchphrase now, I guess. One such method of promoting this kind of long-form investment is by allowing players to take the game at their own pace. A reason why many of the popular theme park MMOs today have explicitly shifted away from long-term progression is because they operate seasonally, so they can't demand a lot of time when what you are investing time into will likely disappear in half a year. This content being depreciated so quickly makes players, knowing or not, feel psychologically pressured to commit time when they otherwise wouldn't. What RuneScape can have as a curated sandbox and not a theme park is permanence. Every single experience point you gain is a permanent mark and achievement for your account. Every item you earn will always have value, at least conceptually. Content released in 2005 is still done today, and while the rewards are no longer the endgame pillars they once were, they still exist as stepping stones. They still have purpose, meaning, and value, just shifted to existing earlier within someone's progression. This doesn't just translate into your agency and investment feeling worthwhile, it also means the game can ask more of you as well. There is a trust between player and developer that what you have earned will still have its seat at the table if you quit and come back in a decade. This can never and will never be perfect, but what RuneScape achieves is a harmonious balance between the time asked of you and the return you get from giving that time. And by giving time, you are able to achieve most of what the game has to offer. Whether it be quickly or slowly, your own pace is your own. Even more importantly, though, is that the reward is not operatively marooned from the rest of the game. Unlike most of its competitors, RuneScape isn't just quality of its combat and progression that is yielded from only engaging in that. World of Warcraft is only so enjoyable to play thanks to the polish and depth of its combat and movement. It is the best element of the game as content, and sadly, it is the only element really offered. Everything you do, whether it be dragon riding to a location, locating an herb to pick, collecting cosmetics, or braving a dungeon, is in service of preparing to do, or already doing, combat. As a result, there are no horizontal progression systems in the game, and there really is only one option for tangible character growth: power. What comes from this is a depressing stairmaster of progression, where you take steps upward only to eventually reach an end and collapse, waiting for the next cycle, the next patch, to allow you to once again step up and restart your journey. Other games forgo all power progression in favor of strictly horizontal systems, which can similarly feel pigeonholed and devalued, such as Guild Wars 2. The issue is that the aggressive cash shop devalues the collection aspect of the game. When one of the only rewards is cosmetic, and better cosmetics are often available on the shop, what purpose do I have in collecting anything at all? What does it even mean to me or the world? It ceases to have recognized value. RuneScape then somehow manages to do both. Other than our journey into the so-called questing grind, the second realization was a lot more negative. Why the hell are we so damn slow? Oldschool Runescape operates on run energy, a system that, when activated, allows you to move at twice the speed as normal, but as you do, it depletes only to regenerate at a snail's pace. Early on, the associated skill, agility, hasn't been leveled enough to regenerate this energy particularly quickly, and other means of transportation have yet to be unlocked, so what we are left doing is walking everywhere slowly. This is far from exciting, but what it does do is twofold. It allows you to familiarize yourself with the game world and opens the game's reward space for some pretty awesome points of progression. Familiarizing yourself with the world is crucial. Unlike a theme park MMO, your starting zone in RuneScape is an area you will return to time and time again. It's a dense, large, interconnected world, and understanding the methods of transportation, the shortcuts, the things to bring and to avoid is paramount, and exploring Lumbridge and its surrounding locales is a step in a tertiary skill that exists outside of the explicit skills in the game: navigation. And much like any skill, you start at level 1, figuratively, and with every realization and discovery you gain experience and level it up. Like every skill in RuneScape, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, it benefits from everything else. So what started off as a very slow, arduous journey through Mistalin, the starting region, begins to click. The navigational puzzle pieces become clear, and you, in turn, become more comfortable putting them together. Even outside of unlocking more tangible rewards to alleviate the movement situation, just learning the area will speed up your traversal through it. Movement becomes a game in and of itself, aided by parallel progression. For example, leveling your magic skill, you begin to uncover the standard spellbook, housing not only combat and utility spells, but also teleportation spells, which you need the magical currency of the game to operate. runes. At first, the predominant rune used in teleportation, the Law rune, is sparse. You do not have access to a bountiful supply, meaning you must use teleportation magic sparingly. Not only is it expensive to buy from magic shops, it requires a high runecraft level to create yourself, so it really is an aspirational goal at this point in our accounts. We sought other means of transportation, a chronicle, for example, a book associated with a past event that can be charged with relatively cheap pages that you can use to teleport to the entrance of a nearby city, Varrock. This opens up convenient access to a new territory. As you progress through quests, you also unlock the Fairy Ring transportation system, allowing you access to a network of teleportation points across the entire game. Each one of these unlocks does not increase your damage, it doesn't increase your health or ability to combat enemies, it simply enhances movement and navigation, which in turn educates you on the world you inhabit. One of my favorite skills quickly became construction, as it intersects with just about everything in the game. You can talk to a real estate agent and buy a house in one of the many cities around the world. This house, enterable through a home portal at the location or through the teleport to house spell, accessible from level 40 magic, starts off as a humble shack and slowly blossoms into various interconnected rooms, each with a unique purpose. Requiring 50 construction, you can build a room that houses 3 portals which, when imbued with a large sum of runes, act as permanent teleports to certain locations in your spellbook. As you level your construction, you can later on build the Teleportation Nexus, a portal chamber that houses over a dozen locations at once. What this does is combine the cosmetic, the architecture, achievement gallery, the heads of slain enemies with actual useful utility that promotes your return time and time again. It doesn't just become a storage dump for cosmetics like many housing systems do, it is both a display of achievements and a core utility for the rest of the game. It becomes a hub that reflects your interests, aesthetics, and goals. What this issue of traversal did is allow us to pay closer attention to our surroundings and in turn learn more about the world we inhabit, which perfectly falls in line with the need to constantly revisit areas and utilize their many features. Due to this, RuneScape's world always feels like it's growing. This is a feeling totally absent from, well, any theme park MMO, because the only area ever worth visiting is whatever is newest and most relevant. Joining in on OSRS at the start of 2024 was a wonderful decision because it was right at the launch of their newest region, Varlamore, a large landmass that will see expansion over the course of 3 parts, offering content for just about all levels. This release showed in a macro sense the way large-scale and small-scale content gets integrated into the grander lexicon of Gielinor, the world. In the first week, there was a buzz and excitement over the new boss, the new minigames, the new quests and features, but by week 3, it's another road, a new winding path to take your character on if you see fit. By comparison, my life in Azeroth was a lot less colloquial and warm. I filtered through the expansion and in 2 years forgot all about the stories, characters, zones, dungeons, and raids because they no longer served a purpose. The captivating essence of Varlamore was the way that its utility ramified through the entire game. Each new feature a fixture of someone's first or 5th journey. In front of my very eyes, it became yet another attraction of the world rather than the only attraction of the world. A great example is the Mastering Mixology minigame launched with Varlamore Part 2. It's a relatively small addition that itself was marred by controversy. Its goal was to provide quality of life upgrades to the Herblore skill. Herblore is challenging, it's a buyable skill, and as an Iron Man I obviously do not have access to player-to-player trading outside of trading between myself and my groupmates, so obtaining the necessary herbs and secondary ingredients for potions is done through farming, another skill, and all kinds of other different combat options. As a result, leveling is quite difficult. This minigame alleviates some of this by allowing you to recycle unneeded herbs for paste that is used in said minigame. By interacting with its mechanics, you receive an output of points that can be spent on a variety of rewards. Goggles that have a chance to save ingredients, a necklace which can create potions with additional doses, a chug jug that allows you to drink multiple potions at once, new ingredients for new potions, and my favorite of all, a new section for your bank that stores all of your unfinished and finished potions, freeing up over 100 spaces. The rewards then are great permanent additions to the world, but also optional. They aren't required to interact with the skill, but they offer enough incentive to earn. The influence of this relatively minor update is a ripple effect on so many other processes simultaneously ongoing in the overworld. The ability to create goading potions, for example, which make doing the arduous Slayer skill a little less demanding of your attention, or the prayer restore potions that make some of the most long-form, challenging content like the Inferno just a tad bit more approachable. What I'm saying is that the content delivery doesn't need to be enormous to have a substantial impact on the game, which means that an individual developer can technically create more content than hundreds of developers in a theme park MMO, because not only does the content not depreciate, the systems that it does influence make its value automatically appealing. And all of this can only exist when all of the systems in the game compound, intersect, and enmesh with one another. As my group and I found our footing in Gielinor exploring the depths of its associated systems, we became more confident in our gameplay. Personally, I found a lot of joy in learning the strange intricacies of the combat system, which on its surface looks point, click, and wait, but upon investigation reveals a truly confounding and awe-inspiring amount of depth. Most intimidatingly was that my skill in prior MMOs like World of Warcraft really didn't carry over. There is no ability rotation, no standard movement, nothing seems to work like it did there. In fact, one of my earliest realizations upon trying to learn the combat system was that the kinds of games that do carry over a level of skill are precision click-based, first-person shooters like Counter-Strike or even Osu. The majority of Oldschool Runescape's combat depth stems from two factors: knowledge through preparation and precision. At one point, my group Iron Man comrade who had never played RuneScape asked me when we can unlock more bag space. I didn't have the heart to break it to him. You are restricted by 28 slots in your inventory. Of course, you have a bank that stores just about anything, but what exists in your bag is what you take with you wherever you go. It's a hand-picked loadout. Your teleportation runes, your combat equipment which you can of course wear, your food to heal, potions to restore prayer, and everything else that you may need. Random quest items, pieces of utility, tools for different skills. This restriction, this limit, is also a puzzle to solve. As you struggle to complete a difficult encounter or are thinking about ways to optimize your efficiency in grinding an already completed encounter, you are constantly thinking about your inventory layout, what you can bring, what can you not, and what you are missing. This puzzle, like many of the features in the game, has a residual consideration attached to it. It is a worm that endlessly exists in your mind. You go to sleep and wake up thinking about a solution unique to you. This is of course why the game is so addicting, and also what relays much of the depth in its combat. The preparation and eventual execution is, in appeal, similar to even classic World of Warcraft, wherein the encounters themselves are less difficult than the preparation of buffs, potions, and equipment. Oldschool RuneScape doesn't skimp out on difficulty though, making preparation even more important. The second branch of combat is precision, clicks. Oldschool RuneScape is a surprisingly fast-paced game that on the top end demands incredibly quick and precise clicking on multiple fronts. Beyond paying attention to the mechanics on screen, you must also, for example, equip appropriate gear in your inventory. This is called gear switching, wherein you, as quickly as possible, equip one, two, or an entire set of items dependent on what the fight is demanding at that moment. You are also managing your prayers, a system buoyed by the prayer skill, granting you a selection of combat-centric buffs, most important of which are the three protection prayers: protect from melee, range, and magic. You may only have one active over your head at a time, and while you do, you can absorb all of the damage of that associated type, usually. The downside is that your prayer points drain as you have prayers active. The more prayers, the quicker your points drain, and upon depleting these points, you may no longer activate any prayers. On top of that, you can only recover your prayer points outside of combat at altars or within combat with potions and a select few other items. Finally, you are also managing movement. If it hasn't been mentioned before, RuneScape's movement is unique. Some may call it clunky and unresponsive, others deep and fulfilling. In reality, it is both, and probably a lot more. Factually, it runs on a tick system where every 600 milliseconds or 0.6 seconds, an action is registered, whether that be changing prayer, an item being equipped, or a movement of your character. This is where precision really becomes important, because what you can do is equip multiple pieces of gear within a single tick. A single registered action can actually inhabit many converging actions as well. Talented players can switch an entire set of gear and weapons within a single 600 millisecond time span, all the while moving, dodging, and preparing. There are many other features I'm avoiding for whatever brevity there is left, but one of the most rewarding aspects of RuneScape's combat has been mastery over otherwise alien systems and the kinds of rhythmic flow states that develop as a byproduct of that. Rhythm really is the key term here. RuneScape is as much a rhythm game as it is an MMO, a fact most aptly captured by its most talented players that so effortlessly execute sets of awe-inspiring rhythm for a protracted period of time. This rhythm is disrupted most frequently by the highest skill element of its combat, which is the player versus player. If the meticulous flow state of top-end PvE content is a summer sonnet, then top-end PvP is a kind of freeform improvisational jazz, a hard bop sparring match between people both precise in their clicks and improvisational in their responses, trying to throw off their opponent through surprising movements, delayed attacks, lightning-fast gear switches, prayer switches, and unique manipulations of the animation. Once grasped, it is a sight to behold, no less impressive than watching the greatest StarCraft pros or CSGO players. There is so much to cover about this game. I hope my brief summaries of some of the most captivating elements of Oldschool Runescape did the game justice, but what is left to cover is far, far greater, topics I am sure I will revisit and elaborate upon in future videos. If there is one thing most evocative of my time in Gielinor, it is something I hadn't even considered when creating my account. It was the choice to not do it alone. MMORPGs more often today than ever before are sought after for mainly solo gameplay, and that is a byproduct of the technological evolutions of our real world, allowing us the ability to connect outside of games far more conveniently than inside of them, in many ways devaluing one of the founding pillars and appeals of the genre. But, as I hinted at earlier in this video, what is often missed by this need for solo behavior is just the simultaneous nature of the genre as a whole. You don't need to be sweating at a keyboard with someone else as much as you simply need to inhabit the same world, share the same reality and relatable experiences. The most beautiful moments of Oldschool Runescape aren't just the accomplishments after dozens, if not hundreds of hours of grinding, but also the quiet moments. Of course, even quiet moments can occasionally be interrupted by unfiltered and alarming excitement.
Speedrun, stop the timer, stop the timer.
Oh my
god! Oh my god, it was it! You call it! Holy shit! Are you ready, dude?
Yep.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Oh fuck.
Yep.
Oh fuck. Oh fuck,
Please.
dude. Oh fuck,
Please.
dude. Do not be a helm. Do not be a fucking helm. I swear to fucking god, if you're a helm, I swear to fucking god. Come on, baby. Come on.
Yes!
Let's go! Let's go!
Yes!
Let's go!
Let's
Let's go!
Yes!
It grows deeper still, the more flame you covet. Flame, oh, flame.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! These moments are incredible because the long-term progression demands them to be. There is no other option. OSRS has the ability to offer excitement of this nature that can easily exist outside of just challenging content because of its knack for permanence as well as the agreed-upon value of what is sought after. But after the gasps of shock and pleasure die down, the quiet tends to return. To harken back to the residual consideration felt trotting through the decrepit lands between in Elden Ring, I felt an overwhelming sorrow, a feeling of hopelessness, loneliness, and intangible melancholy. Those who walk the halls of the broken castles, superstructures as palimpsests of times you will never see, are all lost, much like you, following faint, guiding light. It's odd then that what elicited such powerful lonesomeness is evocative of something that did the opposite. After all, that is the most beautiful part of online games, is it not? It's the most beautiful part of the internet, what there is left of it, feeling together, alone. In contemporary MMOs, what is often stuffed into one or two major cities that act as hubs to the rest of the game is essentially everywhere in RuneScape, the melting pot of different voices encapsulating utterly different experiences. One of the most oft-cited memories for any MMO player who grew up with the genre is seeing a high-level player and gazing up at them in awe. Who are they? What are they wearing? How are they wearing that? And wanting to do just that. Today, these experiences are of course muted thanks to the easily accessible information of the internet, but somehow the minute, faint, guiding light, almost imperceptible, still exists in this old, medieval point-and-click adventure game. It could just be the fact that the entire world, from starting zone to the far-fetched reaches underneath a volcano, is inhabited by a thorough diversity, or just the lack of endless cosmetic glut. It could also be the vague sense of community developed by a mutual appreciation of something outmoded by present technology. It could be the fact that Oldschool Runescape, as one of the most popular MMOs on Earth, is actually growing, both as a game and in its player count, unlike its competitors. What it is to me is a testament to a world that offers enough binary, simple processes that on their own act as letters, but when strung together form words, sentences, paragraphs, and pages, dissertations, and novels coded by language unlike anything else in the genre, expansive enough to be understood and spoken by its players, and unique enough to garner the interest of onlookers. It is a veritable melting pot of approachability and separation, as many developers struggle to keep their multi-decade-old MMO alive and relevant in the eyes of players who flit to and fro haphazardly. Oldschool Runescape only further entrenches a pre-existing player base that has committed more than just their lives to the game. They have learned a separate language, one that doesn't translate to any competitor. They have an entirely different ecosystem for content creation that yields higher quality videos and wikis than the likes of World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, Guild Wars, Elder Scrolls Online, and many others. In many ways, the community is involved in the realist world which currently exists within the MMO landscape. A deep irony considering how paltry the game world looks when compared to whatever Unreal Engine 69 slop gets published and immediately forgotten. If anything, I believe that Oldschool Runescape is a testament to the values of systems and function over fidelity and gaudiness. My group Iron Man is almost a year into its journey now. Collectively, we have well over 4,800 hours played, and in some ways it feels like we're just getting started. I can look at my skills and be proud of my accomplishments. I can look at my early gameplay and compare it to now and see the improvement. But when I idle anywhere, I often see someone who is 10 times deeper in their own journey and understand there is so much more left to do. Whether that manifests as a continued passion for my Iron Man or in picking up an entirely new challenge is irrelevant to the greater fact that regardless of what I choose, even if it is to unsubscribe tomorrow and come back in a decade's time, RuneScape, unlike its competitors, unlike any game really, will be right there where I left it and so much larger.
Oh my god! No shot! No way! Oh fucking way!